Thank you for joining us for the Barbados Today afternoon news for Tuesday, December 19. I am Mary-Claire Williams. Prime Minister Freundel Stuart today gave voters an indication that elections will not be called anytime soon. Stuart went to Parliament this morning to request supplementary estimates in the sum of $591,067 for the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Stuart, who is the MP for St. Michael South, noted that certain expenditures have been incurred in reopening 30 constituency registration centres in preparation for next year's poll. He noted that the sum, which was allocated at the beginning of the financial year, was insufficient to meet the expenditures projected to the end of this financial year.
The expenditures incurred and projected include the purchase of printer ink, surge protectors, cameras, and other peripherals used in registration equipment. And therefore, under Account Code 210, the sum of $117,881 is required to supplement the estimates.
The Prime Minister added that the purchase of additional software licenses for the 30 registering officers is among additional expenses to be incurred in preparation for the election.
All of these expenditures are related to the fact that in a few months' time, certainly until the end of the financial year, preparation will have to be made for an upcoming general election. And the department has to be properly positioned to do all those things that are necessary to ensure that our election machinery is properly oiled and smoothly functioning so that we can go through that process as we have done so successfully from the time universal adult suffrage was introduced in Barbados in 1951. We have been able to manage our elections successfully and smoothly ever since we embarked on these processes on a mass scale. But the processes have become a lot more complex with the passage of time.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Mia Mottley is calling on supporters of the Barbados Labour Party to prepare themselves for when the election is called. Addressing the BLP's Christmas party last night, Mottley pointed out that today marks 10 weeks to the dissolution of Parliament.
It is time to believe again, and to believe in the promise of Barbados and in the glorious nature of what Barbados can offer for all of us. And I ask you to do so even as this government struggles its way to the finish line. Because as of tomorrow, it will be 10 weeks to the dissolution of Parliament. And after tomorrow, you are literally counting down the days until Parliament is dissolved. And that which cannot be called by Freundel will then be determined by the Constitution of Barbados. We are close to delivery of this country. But we can only do it with each and every one of you playing your part.
In other news this afternoon, the International Monetary Fund is painting a worrying picture of the impact of a failure or near failure of Sagicor would have on Barbados and the Caribbean. And it says it could be worse than the Clico collapse. The IMF says a brief review of Sagicor's financial statements and actuarial reports did not reveal any untoward or serious financial or risk-related issues. But it warns that the Sagicor Group poses systemic risk for Barbados and the region. The IMF was invited here by the Financial Services Commission to review the current supervisory framework which it uses to supervise Sagicor Life Inc. And it also found that the FSC is not in a position to conduct a group-wide supervision, and solo supervision is weak.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
Thank you for staying with us. We're back now with news from the region. Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Stuart today jokingly called for CARICOM member states to consider drawing up its own blacklist of international countries that are considered to be tax havens. Stuart was responding to the recent blacklisting by the European Union of 4 Caribbean countries on a new list of tax havens, saying their inclusion is unfortunate. The EU finance ministers said earlier this month that the countries are not doing enough to crack down on offshore tax avoidance schemes. CARICOM has condemned the move by the EU, and Secretary General Erwin Larocque said last weekend that the EU's decision was based on new and unilaterally determined criteria. On the international scene, the U.S. Congress is set to approve the biggest tax overhaul in 3 decades. This would mark the first major legislative win for the Trump administration. We get more in this Reuters report.
The House of Representatives, which introduced tax legislation barely 6 weeks ago, acts first with an afternoon vote. The Senate could follow Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning after a scheduled 10 hours of debate. Republicans insist the sweeping tax cuts for corporations, small businesses, and individuals will boost economic and job growth. They also see the plan as key to maintaining majorities in the House and Senate when voters go to the polls next November. Lingering doubts about the fate of the tax bill all but vanished Monday after 2 of the last Senate Republican holdouts, Mike Lee of Utah and Susan Collins of Maine, agreed to support the legislation.
While it is by no means perfect, on balance, this reform bill will provide much-needed tax relief.
Democrats unanimously oppose the bill.
It's a monumental con job,
arguing it's a giveaway to corporations and the wealthy that would add $1.5 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade and deepen the income gap between rich and poor.
And finally, the United Nations General Assembly will hold a rare emergency special session on Thursday at the request of Arab and Muslim states on President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Palestinian UN envoy Riyad Mansour says the General Assembly will vote on a draft resolution calling for Trump's resolution to be withdrawn. It was vetoed on Monday by the U.S. in the Security Council, and the remaining 14 members voted in favor of the resolution. That's news this afternoon. Remember, there's more on our website, www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, and like us on Facebook. We're on Izumi Media in bus terminals and Screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also find us on Mix 96.9 FM. I am Marie Claire Williams. Good afternoon.